Hello, my name is Mark Ellis from Stick and Rudder Studios, and today I want to take you through a tutorial on complex key definition using virtual devices within X-KeyPad 1.5. So in today's tutorial, we're going to cover what the label structure is, for a key on a virtual device. And then we're actually going to get right into the C172 virtual device sample. And we're going to take a look at controlling colors on the keys. We're going to look at lines and line segments, how to use simple fonts, what are the various segment data types, and formatting numbers. So before we get into the 172 sample, let's just talk a little bit about a label structure on the virtual device. First off, and you've probably seen this in some of the other tutorials, your labels can be conditioned off of a data ref. We saw this, and we're going to see it again in the transponder mode key, that as the transponder mode went through its various values, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, we could have a completely different label showing up in that key based upon the, what mode the transponder was in. So not only can labels be conditional, but a label can also have multiple lines. And generally, lines when they're drawn on the key, they're always going to be centered, so it'll center the text. And then within a line, we also have the ability to have multiple line segments. And what this allows you to do is intermix different pieces of data, on a line. So as an example, you could have things like static text as part of the line. You might have some numeric data that you're getting from a data ref as another part of that line. You may choose to switch fonts so that you could have, possibly static text intermixed with symbol fonts like the big up and down arrows, or the left and right arrows, or other symbols that you can get from the symbol fonts. And the other thing that you can do with line segments is you can have complete control over the color of the line segment. You can, if you want part of the line to be red, that's possible, and if you want another section of the line to be green, you can do that too. So by default, it's just going to use the font colors that you defined at the label level or the key level. But as you get down to line segments, if you don't want that default color, you can override it and come up with some pretty cool effects if you want to do that. So without any further ado, why don't we jump right in to the C172 sample and take a look at some keys. Okay, so I've got X-Plane running. I've got the sound turned down on it so we don't have to listen to the Cessna 172's engine running, and I've pushed the simulator window off on another monitor. And what we're looking at here is the virtual device sample for the Cessna 172, and I've also brought up the X-KeyPad configuration editor. So let's take a quick look at the transponder key. Which is this one right here. So the first thing I want to show you is, if we come over here to font colors, first thing I would do is let's take a look at the logic data ref, which is driving a lot of the logic on the conditionals. You'll see here that we're looking at the transponder mode, and as I move the transponder through the modes, you'll see that the current integer value is changing from 0, it goes all the way up to 4. So it's got a range of 0 to 4. Okay? Now let's take a look at the font colors. So you'll notice in the key here that as I move this through, for the most part, the font colors are either black or white. And whether we want the black or white depends a little bit upon what the background color is going to be. So you can see here that when it's equal to 0, I want the font color to be white. When it's equal to 1, I want it to be black. When it's 2, I want it to be black. When it's 3, I want it to be black. And when it's 4, I want it to go back to white again. Now the same thing's true for the key colors. If we come over here and take a look at them, you'll see that when it's 0, it's kind of a lightish gray color for a background. When we're in standby mode, we're going to actually use dual colors, okay? And with a dual color, remember that it'll flash back and forth between the two colors. So our primary color is yellow, and our secondary color is effectively that same gray that we had back when the transponder was off. So you can see with the key what it does is it flashes back and forth between, the yellow and the gray background. When the transponder's on, we want it to be green and just a single color. When it's in altitude mode, we want it to be green and a single color. And when it's in test mode, we want it to be that gray background color. So it kind of gives you a feel for what you can do with the colors at the major key level. Now let's take a look at the label itself. Okay, and you can see here that we've also got these conditioned, and there are 3 lines associated with each of these labels. If we just kind of go through them here, you'll see that what is each line's got XPDR. They've all got that. On the next line, they've got, using the arrow font, the letters B and A, which I'm going to show you in a minute. We're going to bring up the font table for the arrow font, and you can see that a B and an A equates to the left and the right big arrow. And then on the third line, the state of the transponder. So in this case, it's off, standby, on, altitude mode, and test. And we actually don't have any line segments. If we look at each of these lines, you could see that they have one line segment, and it's simply nothing more than static text. And we're going to look at another example where we get a lot more sophisticated with this. Okay? So that kind of gives you an idea of how you can do some more with conditional labels. Now, what I do want to show you is these, how do you figure out what letters you need for some of the symbols? Well, let me bring over the user guide for X-KeyPad. And actually in the back of the manual, in the appendix, there are glyph tables for the two symbol fonts we have. So the 2 symbol fonts we've got is we have an arrow font, and then we've got a combined symbol font. So if you want to know what letter do you have to type in to get a particular symbol, you just come to the back of the user guide here and you can look at it. So we know that an A is going to give you a right arrow, a B is going to give you a left arrow, C would give you an up, D would give you a down, E is going to give you sort of one on a 45-degree angle. You got some of these circle arrows here. So now you know which letter you need to put into the editor into the text with that particular font selected to get that to show up. And just to show you here, if I wanted to change that one of those arrows to maybe say one of these things like this, these chevron-looking arrows that are lowercase a and b. If I move this out of the way, if I come in here, if I were to change a and b to a lowercase a and b, you'll notice what the key does, right? So you use those symbol tables. It's actually, I did it backwards. It's actually B and then A to get them to look like that. So again, back over here to the glyph tables. You just look at the back of the manual and you could see, and the combined symbol font's got some additional symbols, actually some symbols and letters that are kind of combined together so that you maybe don't have to use too many line segments to get something to show up. Okay? One other thing you can do is if you don't want to look in the back of the manual, there is a feature up here on the virtual device under options called show font samples, and it brings up a little pop-up window here that you can pick the particular symbol that you want to look at, which font you want to look at, and then you can simply type, right? So we know an A and B, and we know an uppercase A and an uppercase B will give you this. So you can kind of hunt and peck and experiment. But it's faster, frankly, to just go over and open up the user guide and go to the back and look at the appendix and look at the glyph tables and figure out exactly what you need to type to get that particular symbol font to show up in the line segment the way you want it. All right. Let's take a look at a more complicated key like the Nav key. Now this key is interesting. What it's showing you is the nautical miles to the next waypoint, and it's showing you what mode the CDI is in and what the name of the next waypoint is. And what I'm going to do is just shut off activity here, and so that you can see as I change the CDI down here, you can see that what it's able to show is what's the nautical miles to the VOR that you've got tuned, what's the nautical miles to the VOR2 that you've got tuned, and what is the nautical miles to the next waypoint, okay? And if I actually had a tuned VOR here, it would give me the ICO code for the VOR in here. So it's interesting with this is all this information comes from slightly different data refs. So we've got to have a key that's pretty dynamic in the way that it works. Okay, so what's interesting with this particular key is we've got some pretty complex logic going on in here. First off, the logic data ref is actually determining what the background color of that key is going to be, because that key is actually your nav mode key on your autopilot. So when it's on, it indicates that you've got nav mode enabled or nav mode armed if it's flashing, that type of thing. But for actually controlling what's going on with what's being displayed, we've got to override that because we actually have to look at some different, a different data ref for that. So let's take a look at how we do that. If we come up here, and let me just get it so that we're on the GPS one, right? If we come in here and we take a look at this condition, you'll notice that there is a little yellow button here called source, which allows me to, by default, the source for the condition is going to be the logic data ref. But in our case, we actually want to look at a different one that's going to be this data ref that indicates what mode the CDI is in. So if I click on this, it brings up another UI where I can pick the different data ref I want to drive the logic test. And here what I'm doing is I'm looking at the HSI selector. And as I manipulate this, you'll see that it goes through the values 0, 1, and 2. So it's 0 for VOR1, it's 1 for VOR2, and it is a 2 for the GPS. Okay? So anytime you see this source button and it's yellow, that's indicating that you've overridden it, okay? And again, if you don't override it, it'll go back to using whatever the logic data ref is. Like I said, this key is a little complicated because we're trying to drive the condition of the key using a lot of different logic. The background color of the key is going to be driven from the autopilot state, but the content of the key is going to get driven by the state of the HSI selector. So this is a good example of how sophisticated you get with this. Okay, so let's take a look at the key in the GPS mode, which is what it's in right now. You'll notice that we've got 3 lines, okay? We've got nav, the text NAV up on the top line, and that's going to be constant for all of the different states of the key. On the next line, we've got 43.5 NM. So this 43.5 is actually going to be coming from a data ref, and the NM is static text. And then on the third line, we've got the static text GPS, and then this KEEN is actually going to come from a string data ref or a byte array indicating what is the next waypoint that's dialed into the Garmin 530 GPS. So let's take a look at this 43 point nautical miles, okay? So I've got this line selected here, and now we come down and we look at the line segment. And we can see that the line segment actually consists of 2 segments. The first is going to be this number, and the second is going to be just the static text nautical mile. Now, line segments can have different types of data in them, and you pick what you want from this drop-down list here, right? So it either could be static text, it could be a custom string, which I'm actually going to discuss in the next tutorial when we go over formulas and expressions, because a custom string is a way that you can use Fly with Lua to generate a string that you want to display within a key. It can be the contents of the numeric buffer, and we're going to look at that in a minute on the clear key. It can be numeric data, which is what we're going to be using for this distance value. and it could be a substring of a byte array within the simulator. Okay, so let's take a look at this numeric data. So let me select it. In the definition for the segment details, I'm giving it the data ref that I want to look at for that 43 nautical miles. And it's actually going to be the HSI DME distance in nautical miles. Okay? And that's what we want to get that value from. And here it's showing me the current integer value, the current float value. And what I can do is determine how do I want to use it. I want to use it as a float, so I'm not going to check off this use as integer. We're going to use the multiplier as 1. We don't need to scale it up or anything like that. It's actually already in the units, we want. But then we've got this format string over here. And the format string allows you to control how many character spaces you want this number to take up in the label. And it tells you how many digits to the right of the decimal place you want to display, and how many potential leading zeros might you want to put in. So in my case here, I have it set to 0.1, which says display as many numbers to the left that you need to show the true value, and show me 1 decimal point. If I want this to go to 2 decimal points, all I have to do is say 0.2. And you'll notice up in your key, it's now showing 43.48. If I go to 3, 43.481. Okay? Say as an example, what I want is I would like that field to have leading zeros on it, and I want it to be a maximum width of, I don't know, let's say five character positions. I could say 0.5, and now what it's going to do is it's going to come up with 0.43.5, to show it. Okay? If I wanted extra leading things, I could say like 0.6. And it would now put some additional zeros in front of it. Or I could make it a fixed width, something like 7. And you'll notice that what it is, it threw some spaces in front of it. Generally, what you're going to want is, typically what you can find is, where I use the leading zero sometimes is on things like heading and course, where I want it to say 090 instead of just 90. For things like this, I just give it the decimal positions that I want, to show how that is. Now let's take a look at this third line here. Now you'll notice in the third line, for the first segment, we've got the static text GPS, and you can see that being defined here. The second segment is another data ref. In here, the data ref is GPS _ nav ID. Now this data ref is actually a byte array within the simulator. It's an array of characters. And what I can say here is I want this to be a substring of that byte array. And I'm saying that I want to take from index 0 all the way through index 3, which is going to be the first 4 characters, which is what an ICO code would be, and display that on the key. So example, if I actually drop this down to 0, you'll notice it's showing KEE. If I were to put this up to 3, but move that up to 1, now it'll show EEN. Which sometimes, by the way, for a VOR, some people actually refer to it like that, right? So you could actually have this behave a little bit differently for a VOR versus the GPS if you wanted it to. So there aren't that many data refs in the simulator that are byte arrays. This happens to be one of them, but you'll come across them from time to time, and you may want to, have that data show up in your key, and you could use the substring to be able to do that. Okay, and then what we have is if a data ref changes because maybe you have to get it from a different place based upon whether if I come over here and I select these things based upon whether you're looking at the nav, the nav 1 or nav 2, you'll notice down here that I actually have to get some of the data from different places. Like if I've got nav 1 selected, I have to get this the ID of the VOR from this other data ref. If I got VOR2 selected, I have to get it from a different data ref. So you can see that based upon what conditional label has been selected, you can completely dynamically change, where you're getting data from. So you could build up some pretty complicated keys using this technique. All right, let's take a look at another one. Let me put the activity back on here. let's take a look at the clear key. Now the clear key is one of the unique things about this is we want this to show the number of values that are getting entered into the numeric pad here. So if I type in 125, you'll notice that 125 is showing up, in this key. Now that's another type of a segment, okay, that you can use. So if we take a look at this line, you'll notice that in line 1 we've got clear. On line 2, we've got a segment, and the segment is the number, the numeric buffer. You'll remember in the previous video on numeric data, as we talked about the numeric buffer, that is a text string that shows the numeric characters and the decimal point and the minus point that you may have typed in, on this keypad over here. So we've got that as a particular data type we can display on the key. Show the numeric buffer. I can override the font if I want, and that type of thing. The other thing that's interesting here is that on the clear key, we actually are able to force the color. And if I take a look at that line, I'm forcing it to the primary color. Because what I've done here is if I actually go back and I look at the font colors for this key, you'll notice I've actually got a dual color specified. So unless I override things, what it's always going to want to do is flash between a white font and a red font. And since my background key color is red, that's the same color as this font color, what it really does is it makes the font flash white and then look like it went off, almost like there was a light underneath the key and it went away. But it's a trick, right? Because we're really just flashing between these two colors. It just happens that one of the colors is the same color of the background color of the key. Now let's come back over to that key label. You'll notice the behavior here. The clear is never flashing, but the number is. Okay? If I've got something in the number buffer, this is flashing, kind of indicating that you've got something in there. So how did I do that? Well, the way I did it is on the clear static segment, what I did is I said force the color, and I forced it to the primary color. So when you do this, it's not going to flash anymore. In other words, if I came in and I flashed it to the secondary color, it wouldn't even show up because that happens to be red. So if I force it to the primary color in the line, no flashing on the clear. But since I did not force that over here on the numeric value, it's going to flash back and forth between the white and the red. So another little, tricky thing, okay, that you can do, with colors and forcing colors on the, at the line level and maybe even on the segment level. Let me give another example. If I wanted to override this entirely at this segment level here, maybe I want that to always be a purple. I could come in here, I could say force the color, and then on the segment details, I've got a color I can pick, and I have to pick two, and I can come in here and say, I don't know, what do I want it to flash? I don't know, maybe we want it to flash, I could say green, and now it's always going to be green. If I wanted to flash, say green and, I don't know, yellow, I could do that. You can kind of see the kinds of things that you could do. If I don't want to force the color, I uncheck that, and it's going to go back to picking up whatever I defined for the font colors up here on the font color tab. So you've got quite a bit of control over what you do, and the control just depends on whether you're doing it at the key level, you're doing it down at the line level, or you're actually going to do it down at each individual segment. Okay, so I think that gives you an example of some of the things you could do with complex key definitions, and showing you how you can actually override a logic test if the logic test needs to look at a value different than the logic data ref. So I hope this helps you in defining some pretty sophisticated virtual devices. Thank you very much for watching.